Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Game Changer. I'm Mariam Zia. In today's program, we will be discussing two important issues that resonate not only with Pakistan but across the globe as well. In first segment of the program, we will be talking about the evolving situation in Israel-Palestine conflict. And in the second segment of the program, we will be discussing about the impending Kashmir Black Day, which is to be observed on 27th of October. Of course, we know that Israeli aggression continues in Palestine, and so far more than 4,600 Palestinians have died in different attacks. On the other hand, the world leaders and major powers are now mobilizing their efforts to move towards de-escalation of the situation in Israel and Palestine conflict. Of course, when we talk about Kashmir conflict, we know that this started back in 27th October 1947 when Indian forces moved illegally to Kashmir, and till day this has become one of the longest impending conflict that stays in the United Nations Security Council as well. In today's program, we will be talking about the role of major powers as well as the humanitarian crisis that is unfolding in these two regions and its impact on the world, how the world is responding to it and what needs to be done. To discuss this and more, we are joined in the studios by Dr. Wasim Ishaq, who is expert in international affairs. Welcome to the program. And we are also joined by former Ambassador Naila Chauhan. Welcome to the program. And we are joined online by Brigadier Hamid Malik, who is senior analyst. Welcome to the program. Dr. Ishaq, let me start with you with a very basic question, and let's start with the hot issue that the world is witnessing, and the situation is evolving each day about the Palestine crisis. Of course, can you tell us about the recent situation, specifically when we talk about the humanitarian angle of the conflict?
Thank you very much for a very good questions. I think it is the contemporary hotspot in the international scene. I think how the war has been prosecuted by Israel in last over 2 weeks, it has been devastating for the civilians, especially living in Gaza. One, the total siege and blockade, and then massive pounding through air. Israel is also now ready to launch a ground offensive, and we have seen the mobilization made by the Israeli Prime Minister. And yesterday, Israeli Defense Minister also said that we are now ready to go to the next stage of war. So the military aim of Israel, which appears at this point in time, is in fact to decapacitate the military capacity and the killing of the leadership of Hamas. And the political aim, it appears to be, as we have now been able to gather, is to discredit Hamas as a political entity in the eyes of normal Palestinians. So that's why they have brought in a huge suffering for the commoners, for the Palestinians, telling them that this all is because of the Hamas. And since they had launched a preemptive strike, so therefore Israel is just responding to that. And unfortunately, the overall the death and casualties which we have up till now is over 4,600, and out of which more than 1,000 are children only have been killed, and more than 14,000 injured, all innocent. And similarly, on the Israeli side again, more than 1,400 have been killed, and around 2,000 to 3,000 so far, with varying reports, are injured. So on both sides, the suffering is on the civilian side.
Of course.
So where the world community has now started to realize that probably this is going to escalate to the next level. So therefore, the great powers have now started engaging. We have seen President Joe Biden unequivocal support standing behind the Israel. We have seen Prime Minister Rishi Sunak visiting today, French Prime Minister.
But now the narratives maybe are shifting, because we are expecting maybe a spillover of this war into the neighboring countries and beyond the region as well. Of course, we will be talking about later in the program, but let's talk about, when we talk about the humanitarian angle, of course there is a divide in West as well. When we talk about support for the innocent civilians that are being killed in Gaza Strip and West Bank as well, and more than 65% of the killings are of innocent children. So can you tell us about the challenges that the world is now witnessing and what needs to be done to address these challenges when we talk about the humanitarian aid being delivered to the Palestinians through Rafah crossing?
Mariam, as far as the challenges are concerned, it's not just humanitarian, it's also political.
Right.
Humanitarian, yes, how far will the Israelis allow the trucks to go? At this moment, I think about 17 to 20 trucks have been allowed the aid assistance, and they're trying to choke down basically the Palestinians. So it's a very grave situation. The UN Secretary General has also spoken on it. The international community is talking about it. There are protests in favor of Palestinians in France, in the Western world also. So that is one aspect. The other aspect which is very interesting in this whole episode is that when Hamas did this 7th October, action, it was a very strategic move because they managed to enter the areas which were under Israeli occupation. This had never been done before.
Unprecedented in the history.
Unprecedented, the way they glided in, the way they came in. So it was masterstroke by them. It discredited the Israeli army basically, that Hamas, which is not really a military organization, and they managed. So it's very interesting that what about Abrahamic Accords? Or what will happen to them? What about the countries that were thinking of recognizing Israel? What would happen to that? Would USA really come in physically? Because Biden has made these insinuations that they are willing to get into the war physically. How would Iran play out on this? So challenges are enormous, both at political front and the humanitarian.
Of course, political as well as economic aspects are also going to come into play when we talk about this evolving situation. But Brigadier Hamid, I want to start with Pakistan's response to this evolving situation in Middle East. How do you see that Pakistan's historic support to Palestine issue has evolved over time, and what do you think of Pakistan government's stance at the moment?
I must say that Pakistan has been always in the front line to support our Palestinians in time of crisis. And this time again, our government as well as the Pakistan army has not only sent the humanitarian assistance via Egypt to our Palestinian brothers, but they have also gave a call to the world that this crisis needs world attention. It needs a global response. And what we see presently, that the diplomatic response by the world leader is gaining momentum. Now the atrocities and also the hostile actions of the Israelis are being seen as a hegemonic trend in war between the Israelis and the Hamas. And let me also here clarify that what Hamas wanted world to see, the world was keeping a blind eye about the atrocities of the Israelis, explanation designs by the Israelis, as far as East Jerusalem is concerned, as well as Gaza is concerned. The human suffering in Gaza, nobody was paying any heed to them. So that was the retaliation which was shown by Hamas. And I think it was a masterstroke, a strategic move, which made world to see toward Hamas and as well as the Palestinian miseries. Gaza was made an open jail for the Palestinians. There was no food, no electricity, and there was no future for the youth of the Palestinians. And as I think human rights activists world over, we must understand that the Palestinians also have a right to live a dignified life. And it can only be possible when world supports them against Israel, and Israel is made to believe that they have to give a very dignified life to the Palestinians also. Their explanation designs need to be
have been
limited.
suffering And of course, people on both sides are suffering when we talk about the civilian life losses. But let's talk about the strategic implications for the region. We know that US has also moved its forces into the Middle East. How significant is that move, and how do you see its implications playing out in coming days for the region?
It is the epicenter of, I think, concern now, and it can also lead to expansion of this tension, this conflict in the region as well, Middle East, also the globe. On one side, we see that United States are going to support Israel, but on the other side, what we see the reaction of the Russians, then the statement of the North Korean leader, and as well as we see a very pragmatic response by the Saudi Arabia, and also on top of that, Pakistan, which want that peace should be given a chance to prevail in the region. And it is only possible when both sides they understand that they need to respect each other's rights, they need to respect each other's sovereignty. And as far as international reaction is now concerned, people now believe that the conflagration has a potential to affect the regional peace as well as the global stability.
Of course, and Dr. Saab, when we talk about recent developments, of course, we know that many countries are showing concerns regarding the US actions in this regard, that they may affect the peace efforts or de-escalation efforts in the region for peace and stability. What's your take on that?
Yes, I think United States is mindful of the fact that there should be no more escalation. So, as a preventive measure, they have already moved their battleships to deter any sort of intervention from Hezbollah side from Lebanon, and also to give a message to Iran that not to interfere in these affairs. However, having
but
achieved—
Hezbollah leadership is also in touch with
yes, the
with Hamas
communication
leadership.
is open
Yes.
and still going on. However, the Muslim world is also mindful that if this escalation goes and spreads, let's say, for example, another countries like Yemen and Lebanon and Syria, and Iran gets involved, then probably it will be very difficult to have an escalation control. So therefore, all of them are now diplomatically engaged, and also with the help of major powers like China. Chinese foreign minister yesterday talked to Israeli foreign minister, and they are actively engaged. Russia has already tabled one resolution, which was, although it was not passed, but they have shown a clear intent for immediate cessation of hostilities and the start of humanitarian work at a faster pace. So as we proceed to the next week, hopefully we'll be seeing a lot of great powers engagement at Security Council level as well as regional level. The regional countries, as we have seen recently, the Egypt's peace process, where all the at least the Arab countries and the neighboring countries have participated. So therefore, these are the good signs whereby there is an urgency now being felt at the major powers level, where they want to de-escalate immediately and to find out a way out of this mess which has been created so far. And hopefully the Israel, as it is delaying its ground offensive, probably trying to give way to the diplomacy to take way. However, they just need a firm, in my analysis, firm assurances that such kind of escalation should not happen in future.
Right.
So therefore,
but when we talk about the spillover impact of this war going on in Israel and Palestine, can you tell us about the border situation, specifically when we talk about the borders of Egypt as well as Lebanon?
I think Egypt border is not as vulnerable as the Lebanese border, and we have seen border skirmishes going on since last 2 weeks between Hezbollah's positions as well as Israeli positions. And in addition to that, Israel has also launched certain strikes in Syria. So if Syria responds to that, probably it will be a Syrian as well as Lebanese involvement into the battle right away. So they are still trying to show restraint and show adopting a cautious approach.
So already these things are happening, these skirmishes are happening, like you already mentioned. Do you think this has a potential to go beyond these neighboring countries, or do you think that peace process is going to take precedence over these?
There are all the more chances of his spillover. The major powers are actually mindful of that. Therefore, we have seen the enhanced engagement by the European Union, by the European leaders for sort of de-escalation, or at least not the conflict should not spill over to the neighboring countries. So I think there is a realization, and all the major powers are involved now, and the OIC level, Arab League level, everybody is engaged for some sort of de-escalation and some sort of agreement whereby the humanitarian corridors should be opened and more humanitarian aid should be provided to the sufferings of suffering innocent people of Gaza.
Of course, but we see at the same time, Ambassador Saiba, that the warning to another hospital has been given by the Israeli forces. How significant are these developments, and also how do you see the role of OIC and Arab League and other multilateral organizations who have been previously advocating for the rights of Palestine?
Well, they are all playing their role, whether it's Arab League or OIC. But as you are well aware, there are certain Arab countries that had given recognition to Israel in the recent times. So this Hamas action has actually given a caution that if you do this, this violence will be more, because if you recall, when Mr. Blinken went to Saudi Arabia, the Salman MBS did not even receive him, and they gave him cold shoulder. That was also a very good message to the Americans that their collusion with Israel and depriving Palestinians of their rights cannot go on very far. Because if you recall, in our last programs also, you're talking about would there be a possible recognition by Saudi Arabia of Israel. So this Hamas action has prevented it. So like Brigadier Saab said, it's a master stroke. They basically brought a halt to all these movements that were going on in favor of Israel. Now Israel is on the defensive, and it is also shocking to them that all their intelligence was, Hamas was aware of it. They knew exactly where their posts were, they knew exactly where to go. So this was also shocking for Israel, because until now everybody thought this is the biggest army and this is the most professional army. So it discredited Israel also in a very interesting way. But of course the humanitarian cost is very high.
Of course.
But the political game as it is going is very interesting. God forbid if it escalates, it can embroil a large chunk of the world. So let's hope it doesn't. And I think that big powers are cognizant of the repercussions if this problem is not addressed immediately.
Of course, of course. And Brigadier Hamid, when we talk about these developments, what's your take on this, that what needs to be done to move towards the de-escalation of the situation in Israel-Palestine conflict, and regarding the ceasefire, what kind of steps would be needed?
First of all, we understand that Israeli reaction against Hamas attack is not based on any military plan or any ethics and morality. What we see that they are following Mongol style, that kill the children and the women also, to strike a terror in the enemy, which is not basically possible in 2023.
Right.
If there have been any, as they claim, that the terrorist attack, it should have been intelligence-based, selective target, which should be destroyed. But on the other hand, what we see, they are targeting hospitals.
Right. They are not respecting the international humanitarian laws, of course.
That is to terrorize. That is to terrorize the Palestinians. And what we see, that what is the way forward? Way forward is, first of all, that Israel should be made to understand that it has to accede to the international laws of morality, of the civil population rights. It should not target the civil population. And on both sides, the only negotiations are possible as per the aspiration of the Palestinian and Israelis both. And what we see, United Nations Security Council has already sanctioned the resolution about which they have given two countries which should be made, that is for Palestinian and for the Israelis. Till the time Israelis don't follow that principle, that the Palestinian rights should also be respected, I think no lasting peace can be there as far as the Israelis and the Palestinians are concerned. And also the Israelis should understand that they need to respect the international status of the Jerusalem, that it is a sacred place for the Muslims also and for the Jews also. And when it will be under the United Nations Charter that there is no expansion being taken place in Jerusalem and the Gaza, there is no blockade by the Israelis, and these are the few steps which should act as a confidence-building measures between the Israelis and between the Palestinians. And international community must come forward to ensure that confidence-building measures are first put in place so that both as far as the Palestinians and the Israelis are concerned, they agree to a lasting peace in the region.
Of course, this is important when we talk about the role of United Nations as well. How do you see all this evolving in the coming days, and what needs to be done by the major powers? Of course, they are now moving towards thinking about moving towards a solution, because the spillover might be out of control once it starts happening.
The eventual settlement, as per my analysis, has to happen in the UN Security Council. However, our ambassador yesterday made a speech and said that it is UN's failure that the issues like Palestine and Kashmir since last 75 years are still alive, and the injustices which is being done to the people of Palestine and people of Kashmir, unfortunately, are still like that. And the UN has not done its due share despite its resolution on that. So therefore, I think the United States is about to table a resolution. We have not seen its draft so far, but there will be some sort of resolution which is being sponsored by the United States, and there will be maybe another resolution coming from the Chinese side. So China, Russia together, or China alone. So I think there will be a lot of hectic activity at the diplomatic level in UN Security Council in coming days and coming weeks, and therefore it will certainly, I belong to the optimistic school of thought, will bring some sort of cessation of hostilities proposal on the table, maybe in 1 week or 10 days time.
Of course, and we are hopeful that the situation de-escalates in the coming days, so that the sufferings of people on both sides could be mitigated, and the international community needs to do its role in this regard. We will be taking a short break here, and when we come back we will be talking about the impending Black Kashmir Day.
Our quest is to understand the significance of October 27th, and why it is observed as a Black Day all around the globe. A day that brought miseries, sufferings, depression, grief and sorrow for the hapless people of Jammu and Kashmir when expansionist and colonial India, in violation of the principles of the Partition Act 1947, unlawfully annexed the state.
In this segment of the program, we will be talking about the impending Kashmir Black Day. Of course, Kashmiris on both sides of the border and across the globe will be observing 27th October as Black Day. Of course, this is the day we know that on which in the history on which Indian forces illegally occupied Kashmir, and till this day humanitarian crisis in the Kashmir is impending, and of course world is witnessing it. What needs to be done? What is the role of United Nations specifically, and what of the UN Security Council resolutions we'll be talking in this segment of the program. So Ambassador Sahiba, when we talk about Kashmir conflict, this is a longest conflict in the history. And of course, this is the most militarized zone of the world when we talk about 1 million Indian forces that have been deployed in the region. What's your take on the current situation of Kashmir, specifically when we talk about the 5th August 2019 actions of Indian government?
Well, Mariam, Kashmir is the oldest agenda item on UN Security Council. So, like you look at East Timor, it was immediately made independent. You look at South Sudan, that was made independent. But Palestine and Kashmir are the two longest existing agenda items on the UN Security Council, and there are resolutions there since 1947, 48, 49, which have yet to be implemented. So now is the time. Now we are commemorating 27th October as our Black Day, because this is when the Indian occupation forces invaded Kashmir and deprived them the right to self-determination, which was given to them by UN Security Council through the resolutions.
Where Indian government bent itself, of course, in JPM at the time.
They took it to themselves because they couldn't handle it. It was not out of love for UN or for Pakistan or for Kashmiris. But now that UN Security Council has it as an agenda item, and Pakistan has kept it alive on their agenda item, they did not allow it to be deleted. It is still debated. Now, there have been many ups and downs. In 1971, you could see the Simla Accord, 1974, then so many other developments took place. But Kashmir was always considered as special status place as far as the Indian government was concerned. Abrogation of Article 370
and
was
35A.
And 35A was a violation of that, which happened on 5th August 2019. So that took this whole issue to a new dimension, because earlier on, if you recall Nehru's statements, he had said it very clearly that it is a disputed territory and it will be resolved under the auspices of UN. And then they took a U-turn, and now it has become, supposedly they are not only integral part, but totally without any identity of their own. And now they are trying to encourage the Brahmins and others to penetrate into that territory. Obviously, it shows that they have in their mind that one day the plebiscite will be held. So they are trying to change the demography. And recently, they have gone to the extent of the torture and the things they were doing, total blackouts, no electricity, which is also negatively impacting their economy. Winter is coming, and it gets very, very cold in Kashmir, firstly. Secondly, most of their industry is handicraft, which is basically women's domain. Now, by closing these industries, by closing the electrical supplies, it would now contribute to feminization of poverty, because it was these women who were working hard, earning for the home, because men had been
Of course, that is the economic side of the crisis.
Yes.
But Brigadier Hamid, when we talk about Kashmir conflict, of course we know that Kashmir is most militarized zone in the world. Can you provide us an update on the current situation of human rights violations in Kashmir, as well as the security situation?
Kashmir basically is burning at a point. The Indian military, they are targeting the civilian. They are victimizing the civilian. The brutal actions taken by the Indian military is basically terrifying the civilian population there. Any uprising is being taken as a mutiny, and the people are not only subjected to brutal actions, but their complete family is either burnt or they are killed. And these inhuman actions by the Indian military doesn't conform to any military ethics world over, because any such uprising, they are taken as a political issue, and negotiations are only the, I think, better way of dealing with such uprising. But on the other hand, what we see that 100,000 military and semi-military, paramilitary forces are deployed in Kashmir. Their industry, their youth, their jobs, everything has been actually subset by the Indians. And what we see presently now, it is a story of human rights violation. It is a story of killings at will. It is a story that the Indian military is punishing everybody who speaks either for the freedom or either who speaks for Pakistan. But at the same time, the world should understand and focus about the human rights violations being taken place in this area. Like Palestine, it is again, and I must say, example where world is keeping a blind eye. All the miseries of Kashmiris are not paid to any heed, because when, as far as we see the history of that, the UN Security Council gave them a right for a plebiscite. That okay, as far as the accession is again concerned, let me highlight here and clarify that when the princely states were given the right of accession, there was a precondition also, which the world never knows and pays heed, and that was that the accession either to India or Pakistan should be based on the desire of the populace. And the famous and popular desire of the populace was to join Pakistan.
Of course.
But Hari Singh, nullifying all the desires of the populace, fatally gave an accession letter to the Indian Prime Minister.
Right, of course, and this stays in the history, and it is also part of the history that the UN Security Council resolution number 47 deals with the Kashmir conflict. So how do you see the role of United Nations specifically in regard to resolving or mediating in case of Kashmir conflict, because this has remained an issue that had led to maybe not leading the region from cooperation and success and economic, potential of the region?
I think this unsettled issue of Jammu and Kashmir is the biggest test of the efficacy of United Nations as an international organization.
And it has failed
miserably.
It
has failed miserably in implementing its own resolutions, unfortunately, as it has failed in case of Palestine. And last 75 years, it has added miseries for the innocent people of Kashmir. And let me say that 27 October is a black day because it is a very unfortunate day that the partition plan was not adhered to, and against the wishes of people, the militarization of this area took place. And this instability has resulted 3 wars between India and Pakistan. And every time we come back to this resolution, in terms of Simla Accord, in terms of Tashkent Accord, and in terms of UN resolutions of 1948 and also after the Kargil. But unfortunately, the world only gets activated for the time being, and later on it forgets it. And now if you add the new dimensions of nuclearization of South Asia in terms of India and Pakistan, probably any future war will be catastrophic for this region. So I said that it's about time that United Nations should start thinking and getting its resolutions implemented in terms of Kashmir as well as Palestine. Otherwise, this region cannot afford to have yet another war, because now the war would be in the nuclear domain as well. So therefore, more of a constructive, active diplomacy, and I would say the great powers have to also play a major role now. And as we proceed for some sort of resolution of Palestine, concurrently the world powers have to see the resolution of Kashmir as well.
Of course, but Ambassador Naila, how do you see that the role of United Nations has evolved over time, specifically when we talk about Kashmir conflict? And do you see United Nations playing a more effective role in the coming years?
Mariam, we have to understand the dynamics of United Nations. United Nations is an organization comprising member states. The UN Security Council has P5, right? Now, it does not have its own mechanism for implementation. When the member states decide to implement a particular resolution, then they create, like when they invaded Afghanistan, they created ISF forces. And it was with USA and other countries that came to Afghanistan under UN ambit and the NATO. Now, UN in itself does neither have the mechanism nor the funds nor the forces. So it has to be member countries that contribute to forces. Like when you had UNMOGIB, UN Military Observer Group on India, Pakistan, it was contribution of member states that the contingents were based, because Indians did not agree to it. So they were based in Rawalpindi, and from Rawalpindi they used to go up to the borders, and they used to monitor the line of control.
Right.
There are still many countries who are willing to support UNMOGIP. But the major powers, somehow due to their own geopolitical and geoeconomic interests, would come under pretext, oh, we are under pressure of economy.
But Ambassador Naila, in terms of conflict resolution, there are many disputes across the world that have been resolved. Are there some lessons that we can learn and maybe apply to this specific conflict?
That's the lesson I'm telling you. It is the vested interest. When they want to spend money, they'll find money. When they don't want to spend money, they will not find money. But it is basically political will, lack of political will, because every time that Kashmir situation was brought to the UN Security Council, the resolutions were reviewed, one power or another, I'm not going to name any, would veto it, and therefore implementation could not take place. So it's easier to blame UN, but basically we should understand what UN is. It comprises of member countries, and member countries have their vested interests, and they go by that rather than the general good of humanity. So this is real politics that we have to understand, but that doesn't mean we give up. We continue to argue these issues, bring to fore the sufferings of the people, the human rights violations. The right to life has been taken away.
Of course, and right of self-determination as well.
Determination is another thing, but right to life.
Of course.
They are killing people, they are killing innocent civilians, men, women, children.
Of course. And
so that has to be brought to the fore, and we have to keep on working, and 27th October is a good day to kind of
remind the world of that, of course.
Our commitment to it, and remind the world that this is an agenda that needs to be resolved. It has been there for very long.
Of course. And Dr. Saab, lastly, what kind of mechanisms or steps do you propose to promote dialogue when we talk about Kashmir conflict between Pakistan and India? Because given the current situation and the ongoing tensions, there needs to be resumption of dialogue. What's your take?
Okay, but let me just add few more on the UN part. We have few contemporary examples where United Nations has demonstrated its assertiveness in implementing its resolution, and that is in case of East Timor, that is in case of South Sudan, that is in case of Kosovo, and these are three of the last 2 decades.
But like
however,
Ambassador Saiba mentioned that the vested interests were involved in that case.
But
so
we have seen,
yes,
we have seen United Nations performing its due role.
Yes, there are lessons to be learned, but maybe we are not able,
of course, certain other aspects.
So
when those interests would be met, hopefully the UN Security Council should take a notice of it. I think as far as I am concerned, the diplomacy is the first option and is the last option. We need to engage, and we need to engage at several levels. Maybe if the environment is not conducive for having a direct bilateral dialogue, we may start track 2 diplomacy, which has been very successful in case of India-Pakistan discussions before also. So we may start from track 2 diplomacy. Then we can, as the environment becomes conducive, and after the elections once we have a new government, then they can chalk out a strategy of a constructive engagement with India, with the regional partners and the multilateral forums, and above all is of course the United Nations Forum. So we need to move around from the static diplomacy to a very active and constructive engagement at all levels, and that is the only way forward for having some sort of resolution of Kashmir and alleviating the sufferings of the commonest Kashmiris.
Of course. Thank you very much, Dr. Wasim Ishaq, for joining us in today's program. Thank you very much, Ambassador Naila Chauhan, for joining us in today's program. Thank you very much, Brigadier Retired Hamid Malik, for joining us in today's program. Of course, in today's program, we discussed about the challenges and complexities when we talk about Palestine conflict as well as Kashmir conflict. The humanitarian crisis in both the regions, in both the countries is grave, and the world needs needs to speed up its actions to alleviate the sufferings of the civilians, and there is need for constructive dialogue when we talk about de-escalation of the situation in both the regions. That's all from our side. Take care. Allah Hafiz.